To hear the entire show and many others, visit www.PureMomentumNetwork.net.
And this gets down to the Georgia Guidestones, what they chiseled in, talking about 500,000 people down of the world, and they're already covering up the numbers dead. They're changing the numbers of the people that died in the Holocaust in Europe. They're changing the numbers of the dead in Africa. Instead of billions, they're changing it to millions. People forget. People don't remember, and they don't see them disappearing. All we see is less traffic, more abandoned houses, collapse in the housing market, demolition of houses. People...
Ron, that's exactly right. In fact, I'd like to just add this at this moment because this is critical. Again, we've been talking about redundant systems and or multifaceted approaches to what we're all witnessing and living in right now. And regarding abandoned houses, what we're going to start seeing, and it's already been launched in all the cities right now, are these programs that your cities have adopted to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions or your carbon footprint. And these are coming through code enforcement requirements through your building departments and your planning departments via executive order, where you will all be required to reduce the greenhouse gas or the footprint of your home, the energy use of your home. And there are various dates of required reductions. And what Ron was just saying about homes being abandoned and being demolished, this program in and of itself will be defining the inability of people to be able to reside in their homes. In other words, many homes will be red tagged because pursuant to the requirement to address the greenhouse gas emissions, they won't be able to meet those new environmental codes. And you can go to a very important YouTube that we have up and out. It's called Who is Running America? And the Climate Action Plans. Again, that is Who is Running America and the Climate Action Plans. We go through how these plans are going to impact you. These are all occurring now. In fact, Ron, what I find so interesting in these plans, also horrifying, is the requirement to reduce our water consumption by 20%. And these plans were discussed in the early 2000s. And what do we have here right now in California? In an engineered drought and a requirement that we must reduce our water consumption by 20%. And we're seeing all of this play out according to agendas. This entire orchestration through the corporate structure is run by contracts and grant funding. It's important to understand this is not a loose system. This is not something that's happening pell-mell. This is highly orchestrated with contracts and funding mechanisms with NGOs and nonprofits, private-public partnerships, and the funding of your tax money and the continued increased tax indebtedness that each and every single one of your cities is putting a noose around your neck by continuing to approve and accept grant money from the corporate government structure. And that's what people are missing. Yes,
this
Ron,
was all
please.
laid out. This was all laid out in 1914 in New York City, when that globalists and elite members of major corporations, royalty, met to decide how to take care of the nouveau rich. America was the mover and shakers, the inventors. There was a lot. The patent office was kicking and moving every day. Back in that year, most of the patents were home cooking cooking appliances, from egg beaters to, mechanized apple peelers and cores. That was the equivalent of the .com, with the inventions in the kitchen, making it cleaner and safer for food, canning, systems of canning. And so if you go back and look at videos of the World's Fair in Chicago, you'll just see the just amazing numbers of people and large families with large numbers of children. We don't have that today.
No, and they were all lean, Ron. When I look back at family photographs of my parents, for example, even back in the 50s, our society was not overweight as our society is now because of the level of toxins that we've experienced in chemicals. We have become extremely and made extremely unhealthy.
Well, the big change came around the 90s, 96, when researchers at Monsanto were called to, they were researching the food pyramid that we grew up with huge numbers of bread and starches at the bottom, potatoes and such, and then very little meat in above. And we all grew up with the food pyramid. I think you maybe remember being taught the food pyramid in school.
Yes.
And in 96, they GMO'd wheat and grains and even potatoes now.
So that's why the gluten sensitivity that people are not realizing is as a result of GMO.
They cause the grains to bind differently to the body and the fat. So they were doing an experiment whereby you would only need 1/4 of the grains that you needed before 96. Because what happens is when you eat grains today, it's turned fat, unless you're a marathon runner, and or if you're not eating GMO material, which is harder and harder to find. They're shutting health food stores down everywhere, replacing them, calling it non-GMO, but it's not true.
Well, the problem also, Ron, is, if I may interject, this is that they're, of course, now still continuing to call organic as a possibility. In fact, I just recently visited a Costco warehouse, and they now have an entire section cordoned off with the big sign overhead that says organic. Now, all of us realize, of course, there's nothing organic in the definition that we're trained to believe organic to be because of the chemtrailing, because of the heavy levels of toxins and poisoning that have already landed on the ground, hit the ground with the heavy metals. We know that the polluted water runoff from all of the toxic chemicals that are being thrown into our dump sites. We know that the Superfund money that was created to clean up toxic dump sites has been stolen. They haven't cleaned up the toxic dump sites. They're allowing the poisoning of every aspect of our planet. And this was part of what the report from Iron Mountain talks about. And this is an extremely important documentary to watch that was put together by a Christian group. I can tell you that the book itself is a free download from the homepage of stopthecrime.net, but I would certainly recommend you watch the documentary. I think that it does an excellent job of explaining the intention of industry and manufacturing to use the environment. In other words, this is ecocide, and they planned to pollute it, and they have. And this, of course, was intended to be the reason that they could stop the wars, was to create the environment as such a concern globally. It had to be universally accepted as a shift away from the fear of war, to keep society commonly cemented together under the control of fear. And everything that is occurring now to all of us, we're seeing is more and more fear-based. There's nothing you can read in the psyops propaganda of the media that is not creating mass fear. I'm astounded at how different even, for example, the Drudge Report is now today as it was a year ago. It is nothing but horrific story after horrific story after horrific story.
We the people, had the ability to write our congressmen and senators and ask them, please get us out of these wars. Well, they're not allowing this because what we're having now is what's called deflation. And in fact, I just recently came across the fact that General Motors built all of Adolf Hitler's Panzer Division trucks.
To hear the entire show and many others, visit www.puremomentum.net.